Okay, trying to figure out where to put the chat. I'm going to close it, but anyway, well, wonderful to be with you. This is such a widespread, interesting crowd that gathers, and I really salute you all for making this network so vibrant and important. I'm going to share a screen here, and we'll just get going. Now I have to, there.
Sorry, can I just ask those who are not speaking to put yourselves on mute for now until you're speaking? Thanks.
So this is pretty cool. For some reason, this particular Zoom account, I can expand and see just about all of you and have my second screen up. So you're seeing the Poetics of Coaching, yes? Great, thanks, Carrie. All right. How did this happen? I was sitting in the Atlanta airport restaurant a few years ago talking with my friend Rick Stone, whose name you will hear from time to time. Rick is a master storyteller, and he has a book coming out shortly called Story Intelligence. And Rick, I've known him since about 1998. He is one of the coolest artists because he's a photographer and a painter and a storyteller, and he understands how essential stories are to human beings. And Rick would go so far as to say that human beings are story makers. And so I want to, so he and I were chatting about all of this. And I said, well, what I want to talk about is art and coaching. And slowly we shape that into saying the poetics of coaching, because poetics can be used to say a description of, an unpacking of something. And that's what I'm going to try to do from a different angle than you might have heard before. And let's hope that my screen is working. Here is my premise, that by exploring coaching as an art, not using art, but as an art, we can discover nuances that other forms of inquiry miss, because art is about nuance. We sometimes talk about using art in coaching. Here we will talk about coaching as art. And here's this is the big theoretical slide, so I hope you're all paying attention. It's very complex. The transitive property of equality from mathematics. Who remembers that from grade school? Yeah, good, Nathalie and others. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, you know? And so I'm saying, if coaching is an encounter and art is an encounter, then coaching is art. And I wonder, what does that evoke in you when I assert that coaching is art? Just a couple of comments, leap in here.
I think I would just say, I have to think about it.
Good.
Coaching is certainly an encounter, but many, many, many things are encounters in life. All of life is an encounter. So is art, is it the same or different? And is it the same kind of encounter that art is?
Splendid response. Thank you so much, Lillian. Anyone else? Coaching is art.
So
Sam, I can go for a second. Going back to my undergrad days in arts management, we learned that art fundamentally doesn't exist in a vacuum. The function of art is to communicate an idea. And so I think that lines up directly with what we do as coaches.
David, that's also a spectacular response. And one of the things that I want to explore with you is this notion of encounter. It's one of the things Rick and I talked about is that the encounter of art is always in the present. It's always in the here and now. If the painting was done 500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, you know, or the petroglyphs, the ancient art we can see in some places, the encounter with it is happening right now. And so we need to understand how that encounter is happening. And that's part of why I assert that coaching is art, because in that moment of interacting, it's in the present. We talk about that, but I think it's even more powerful than we sometimes acknowledge. So art requires an encounter. I was in Paris at the Picasso Museum, and I stood in one room. I don't remember what image it was. A lot of them were sketches that Picasso had done. You know, it's in the Marais. I'm sure you all in Paris have been there. And I said, whoop, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I said, this is happening between Picasso and me right now. So what's the conversation that we can have? And many of you have heard the term psychological contracting, which, in case you have not encountered that term, psychological contracting is that I'm your coaching client, and I have both conscious and unconscious expectations of you. And in effect, I form a contract with you, but I don't tell you about it, partly because I don't know about it. And you as my coach are doing the same thing, whether you know it or not. And it's my belief that the vast majority of ethical problems and ethical complaints against coaches stem from this thing that we call awkwardly a psychological contract. And so it's about the encounter. What's Picasso saying? What was Picasso saying when that pencil line occurred? And what am I saying as I encounter it? So here's an image. What are the first thoughts, feelings, desires that you have? 2 or 3 responses.
It feels beautiful and peaceful to me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kathleen.
Lightness and emergence.
I want to stay warm inside.
Right, Dominique.
I'm noticing the lens, that it has water or ice or something on it.
Okay, yes.
It's frightening.
It's
frightening.
frightening.
I can see stones, and in the back, something like a rocket, and on the left, something that's hidden. And yeah.
Okay.
And also it's very dense on the sides. And the only place to breathe is the middle.
Okay. Okay. So one.
I see a forest. I see a forest and beautiful trees, big trees, and a blue sky.
Good. All right. Thank you. So here we have one image and all these different experiences of it. Okay. How about this one?
Calm.
Peace.
A peaceful and serene landscape.
And also a little wild.
And as a photographer and kayaker who knows this water, the only place I can go with it is that there's a problem with it. I immediately become a critic. Can any of you see what the problem with this image is?
I feel like there's a crocodile or an alligator somewhere in those reeds.
The lurking alligator. We have a lot of those in the Sailor's Sea, Alexis, lots of alligators.
Mosquitoes.
Pardon?
Mosquitoes?
No,
I would say
It's
chili
frightened.
and very cold water.
it is cold water. And
Frightened.
the problem with that cold water, Martine, is that it's tilting. It's going to run
Yeah.
out and flow out into the ocean. And oceans don't do that much except after earthquakes. So as the artist who took it and as someone who has been there, I have a different experience than the rest of you do. My encounter with this image is different. One more. What's this?
It's funny, I see a pair of scissors in the middle.
Pair of scissors. Cool.
I see like a guitar or a kind of violin, maybe.
Oh,
Okay, it's metal screws and reflection of maybe sand.
I see a mirror image as well with the metal screws, a split image mirroring.
Cookie, you're the first person in all the times I've shown this who thought it was a mirror image.
A door between two universes. That's clear.
Love it, love it, love it.
So look at what we have with this encounter. We have someone who's seeing the screws in it, someone who's saying what it is, and someone who says what it evokes in it. This image reminds me of, it becomes a metaphor for a door between two worlds. This is what happens when we encounter art. Now, what in the world, how could this be useful to us as coach supervisors? How could this notion of an encounter be useful to us?
It's the issue of perceptions, that we might be looking at the same thing, but our perceptions are different because of our backgrounds, intercultural processes, contexts.
Whoa, whoa, now wait, let's stop there for a second, Cookie. That is a mouthful.
Sorry.
So many years ago, I studied with a rather obscure guy here in the US named John Weir. Anybody encounter John and Joyce Weir? So John's big thing, he was a psychologist. He described something called the apperceptive mass. And he said, this is all the stuff between you speaking and me hearing. And you just listed some of the things in that apperceptive mass filter, that before your words and meaning arrive in my brain, they have to get through a whole bunch of stuff. Am I a literalist? Does my straight white male growing up in farming country in California influence how I see, hear, and experience and relate to you? All of this happens unconsciously. And my belief is that supervision, one of the key tasks of supervision, is to unpack the apperceptive mass so that I can hear and see you. Any thoughts about that?
Strikes me that you also have to have an awareness that it's occurring.
Okay, this is right, Janet. You have to have, and that's the starting point, isn't it? You have to have an awareness that as a human being, this is happening. And I dare say that an awful lot of coaches don't know that it's happening. They think they have such a strong philosophy or belief about coaching that they no longer know that this is happening. They're locked into their belief system. And I think that's a danger ethically and in terms of productivity in coaching. You see, because I'm retiring from this, I'm retiring from other teaching that I've done for a school of coaching, and because I'm retiring in April from ICF's Independent Review Board, I now am feeling much more free to say what I really think. It's a lot of fun. Okay. So.
May I?
Please,
Sam,
Martine.
You said something about unpacking the apperceptive mass to make sure that we hear the other. We could also, maybe I'm just putting that on the table, decide that we don't really need to, in supervision, we don't really need to unpack. We may be also there in sometimes, and I'm speaking about stuff that are so deep that they are hard to hear, there to facilitate a dialogue between the person and themselves. And that's what we do with metaphors. Sometimes we don't have to hear the person. We don't even know what they're talking about, but the most important is that they hear themselves.
I think that that's good, helpful, and that adds, Martine, we're not after perfect understanding. So don't let me overstate my theory here. We don't have to have perfect understanding. The thing I would add, Martine, is that a difference between Picasso and me is that I'm sitting right in the encounter as a living encounter. And so I get to not only get the person to hear themselves, but I have us hear us. And I think that's a radical difference that supervision intentionally adds. We're hearing us. And if you've studied Scharmer's theory U, when we get to this place of co-presencing, we're about as close as we can get to being of one heart, one mind. And in the stillness and the sweetness, the intimacy of that place, we hear things that we don't hear when we're operating as two separate people. Yeah. The bottom of the U in theory U is a unique place in art where we might be sitting with Picasso while Picasso is creating the image. So I want to talk about empathy. I was quite excited when I came across this in an unexpected place. So what I'm going to share with you briefly here is from a book called The Empathy Effect by Helen Rice, R-E-I-S-S. You must read it. She explores this notion of empathy and says, where does the word and the concept come from? And this is part of her explanation, to viscerally feel what it is like to be the other person in a particular situation or moment. And here's where she got it in her research. Early 20th century German, feeling into. And in the historic use of the word, the emotional experience that is evoked by viewing a work of art and feeling one's way into an emotional experience. I just love that. That empathy that we talk about so much in coaching comes from feeling one's way into an encounter. She also wrote a kinesthetic connection with a painting or a sculpture, a sense of being moved by art and a profound emotional resonance with it. What does that possibly have to do with supervision?
Well, what I see here is that there is no link with understanding at all. It is about feeling into.
Yes, Dominique,
things.
and if I went on to more slides from Helen's work, I got to hang out with her briefly one day. She would go on to say that we have to feel into the experience and cognitively talk about it and frame it. That empathy as something that we can use with each other. We have the emotional experience and layer into it the cognitive description. As soon as it's a description, it becomes cognitive, and working with both of those dimensions for sure. But isn't that what we do? Yes, Jonathan.
I was just going to say also, I think like so many things, you can look at it at multiple levels. Are you having trouble hearing me?
It's just a little scratchy in the sound, Jonathan.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
I'm wondering, because Jonathan said multiple levels, I was actually wondering if it's fair to compare Picasso and coaching, or if it would be more, to my mind, it would help me more to use art happening. So art that happens in the moment to coaching. And then again, when you look at supervision, I find it really helpful to look at a picture, because we are looking at art that was created in the moment at a different moment. So looking at a picture and then trying to feel what was happening there and what was going on for the artist and in that moment, that connects to me, or that I resonate with.
Wonderful, wonderful. And although the picture, the coaching incident that we might be reflecting on happened, so good, that was created before, there's also an encounter happening in the present. And one of the things, of course, we have to pay attention to is whether we're focused on analyzing something that happened before, or fully experiencing what is happening sitting with Picasso right now. We have to do both in supervision, and we move back and forth between them. Right? There are approaches to supervision that I've read in the literature that are case analysis oriented. And they, in my view, this is only my saying whatever I want to say these days, perspective, that they're about analyzing the picture. Are those screws in some metal? Well, that's a reflection of something else, et cetera, et cetera. A post-mortem review, it is sometimes called. Well, I don't want to work with something that's dead. I want to work with something that's living.
Well, Sam, do you mind if I share a very recent experience that adds to what you said? And Jonathan is a witness of that. So there was a group that did case analysis that we were part of. Mm-hmm. And I proposed to add something to it, which was once the case analysis were done, I directed the people to, like in a daydream or hypnosis or whatever you want to call it, okay, through their memory of what just happened, who was there, and you know, the whole self. We scanned the whole self, and then I asked them what they knew, what did they know about, what did they encounter about their practice, about themselves and their practice, and themselves in the practice. And I was personally very surprised, because I got an email afterwards from one of the participants who said that she had thought that reflective practice, very senior coach, she thought the reflective practice was her meditation, and she's I would say an observant in meditation, far more than I am. And on the other hand, she would do this case study, but she had never mixed the two of them she had never done the what you call reflective practice, the meditation, whatever, just after looking at a case with colleagues, and that she was, it was immense shift for her. So I think that's what you're talking about.
It is an immense shift when we stop trying to describe something that happened before and start experiencing what's happening to us right now. Yeah. Okay. So here's another image or two. What is your story? Rick Stone says we encounter art. I say we encounter our clients. And what is the story that you're generating right now?
Film shooting.
A baby in France.
Innocence.
I took this at apparently Fontaine in the Fête Patrimoine. Who had no reaction at all. Anybody? You say, oh, that's just a kid.
No, he's waiting for his mother, I think.
Good. Okay, so now here we have a story. Yeah. And how quickly do we form our stories? In fact, in supervision, I like to say, if your coaching client walked into the room right now, what story would you tell me about him or her? What story would you tell me? Because we operate from our stories. Here's one of my poems. So Todd, see how this affects you. I'll read it so you see it and hear it. First waking in rumpled hair, having not adorned myself for public viewing or put on my beauty masks, will I allow myself to be called beloved? First waking in rumpled hair, having not adorned myself for public viewing or put on my beauty masks, will I allow myself to be called beloved?
This makes me sad because it feels sad to me that that question would even be asked.
Great.
Yeah. And I get the word compassion because I feel like that shared humanity of inner versus outer.
For me, it's maturity.
Say more about maturity, Adriana.
Yes, I think this poem told me about what I'm thinking about myself and what I have to do in order to be loved for others. Then here, what I can see is he already knew what had to do in order to be loved for others and they say and por él mismo.
Good. So we might imagine a supervisee coming in to talk with us. And this is the story that the supervisee is telling us about. How many of you have had an MCC coach come to you for supervision saying, I don't think I'm a very good coach anymore? If you haven't, you should go get one of those as a supervisee, because that's cool, mature work. And there's a different kind of exploration and a different kind of encounter with a mature practitioner and mature human being. Totally my favorite supervisees. I'll work with anybody, but totally my favorite. Had one supervisee who came to me and said, I just had an encounter with a client and something happened and I don't think I liked what happened. It was the most subtle little tiny thing that had occurred and shifted the dynamics of the relationship. A beginner doesn't even notice that that happened. Back to the comment about first you have to notice that something's happening. All right, back to Pablo. What happens to you when you look at this?
I like the distortions in here, and they just feel so representative of everything we've been talking about, and how we distort things, how we distort our view of others, how we distort our view of ourselves. Not necessarily a bad thing.
Not necessarily a bad thing, Kathleen. But again, we come back to the point of saying the first step is to know that we make distortions. And there might be some really cool ones that could teach us a lot about a case if we're willing to say, boy, here's the distortion that evokes in me. Could we talk about that? I'd love to do that in supervision. I don't like things to be too tidy. All right, so the girl before a mirror, even the title of it creates a particular story. If it had a different title, I think we would make up different stories about it. Anybody wondering what Picasso was intending when he put these brush strokes on the canvas? That's part of it.
I'm pretty puzzled by this image because what I see, well, there is a tension between the title and what I see. It says a girl before a mirror. It doesn't say lady. It doesn't say woman before the mirror. And what I see a general ambiance or background that to me evokes the church glasses, and the right side on the top evokes for me La Madonna. And so I wonder, and so what I read in this, but it's my personal projection, is that every girl portrays herself into the woman with the child, and there is emphasis on the belly on the right side. So it's and my belly is not doing very well right now in this encounter in the here and now.
Thank you so much, Martine. Great. And if we know anything about Picasso as a human being, he was not so nice.
That's where
Janet?
Sam, that's the question that comes up for me. I'm sure you can hear me, but what I found immediately was that my knowledge of him and his character and his life thoroughly colors my ability to just be open to the impressions of the image and the line and the color.
There we go. So how much does our story, our knowledge of our clients, perhaps especially if we're an internal coach or a supervisor internal to an organization, how much does that deep knowledge that Janet is pointing to, how much does it unconsciously affect us? And how do we manage the tensions of the encounter, our belly right now when this certain client walks into the room, or a sponsor says, "Go coach Bob." And you hear the tone of voice and you know that manager. How much does that affect you? And take it to your supervisor to wander around and unpack the encounter. All right, I'm just going to check with a different screen where I am because I'm conscious of time. I'll send Lily the slides because there are some other poems that I'm happy for you to see. And so here we are. Okay, I want to go to this image. And I'm going to read you a story. So remember that my guide in this world, Rick Stone, says human beings are story makers. And I submit that we make stories so fast that we don't even know they're happening. All right. Regarding our supervisees and our coaching clients and their coaching clients. Here we go. The king is riding through the countryside looking for archers for his army. He rides into a village, and there on the side of a barn are 3 bullseyes painted with an arrow right in the center of each. He says, "Bring the man who shot these arrows." And so after a few minutes, they bring a young boy of about age 10. And they say, "Here you are, your kingship." He was flabbergasted. And he says, "Son, you shot these arrows?" He said, "Yes, sir, I did." And he said, "How did you do this?" "Oh, it was quite simple. I shot the arrows into the barn, and then I painted the circles around them."
That's a good one.
Isn't that spectacular? I shot the arrows and then I painted the circle. So what leaps can you make to that? The importance of knowing this story. What leaps can you make to our work?
We're always trying to make sense of the experience. As you said, post-mortem, it's always after the whatever happened, there is always a narrative going on. And although, I mean, I can see where you're coming, totally agree it's art, but I don't think, how can we as humans escape creating a narrative?
Eva, we can't do it. And that's the point. And that I for me, going to places where I can witness art and exploring my encounter, the living nature of that, helps me fine-tune my my work as a supervisor. Because as a supervisor, I'm always trying to unpack things. Not just for my understanding, but so that the coach cleans off her glasses or adjusts them or says, "Well, I need to go see an optometrist. My glasses are out of date. I need to tune up." And I like using this framework because as supervisor, I say that I have offered or engaged or evoked good supervision when I see something for the first time. When I, as the supervisor, see something for the first time. Because I'm a human being too, as far as I know, and I fall into the same traps, Eva. I keep trying to know directly. That's a screw in that picture. That's a screw. Well, I think so, but what's my story about that? This is the point. How can we as supervisors continually hone our perceptive frameworks. All right. Here's your supervisee. This is an MCC, best coach in the country, walks into your Zoom room one day and walks into you and says, oh, shoot. Where do you immediately go as the supervisor?
I actually think, don't we all feel like that sometimes?
Okay, okay. So we can identify with important to know because if I over-identify with my clients, I no longer see them, I see myself. And we all do have days like that.
But isn't that part of the essence of compassion, empathy? Not completely, but to tap into it.
Well, I think there's a little caution there because I want to make sure that I don't mistake the similarity of our lives to feeling into the situation of the other. And here's an illustration of that, Lillian. My son was injured very badly in a bicycle accident and finally had to come home. He was a 30-something at that point, and finally had to come home for his 4th surgery on his left leg. And he was standing in the kitchen one day, and I made the following mistake. I said, wow, I know how it feels. And he launched into a rage. He said, you have no idea how it feels. And I said, oh, shoot. I've been hurt before, and I mistook my understanding of my feeling for his. I said, you know what? You are absolutely right. What I do know is that you are hurting very badly and that you are frightened because the future is completely confusing to you. And he took a deep breath and he said, yeah. And then he and I could start having an encounter, a real living encounter. So this is for me the difference between, yeah, I've suffered also, and using that as the way to connect versus feeling into his situation.
I was thinking about how tempting it might be to look at this person and say, you're not together, let me help you fix that, without checking to see if he wants to be fixed, or maybe he likes himself this way.
Yeah, of course. You know, coaches, I'm guessing the vast majority of coaches have some degree of rescuer in their beings. We like to tidy things up. At least a lot of us do. And that's the danger. Okay, I'm minding the time, so I'm going to go to another, this of course, you know this in Paris, in the Tuileries. Okay, oops, back here. This is the important thing. So a physician friend of mine gave me a book called How Doctors Think. And this was research by a retired physician. We retired folks get to do some cool stuff. And he began studying very carefully how doctors think. And he came to this conclusion, that doctors form an opinion about a new client in a few seconds when they meet a brand new client. And that opinion shapes their diagnosis. Their diagnosis, much less their treatment. Good heavens. My daughter was in graduate school in New York to become a nurse practitioner. And in one of her clinical rounds in an emergency department one night, in came this man in tattered clothes. He was smelly, he was dirty. They put him on a table And they said, oh, he's drunk again. Starting to create a story. So the presiding, is that what they call them? Maybe supervising physician said, oh, he's drunk again. You know, we'll get back to it. My daughter, with fresh eyes, blessed be the newcomers, for they have fresh eyes. My daughter said, wait a minute, there's something going on here. And she checked something or other. She ran to the physician and said, there's something else happening here. The man died of septic shock a few minutes later. This homeless man had taken his prized possession of a pouch of tobacco and hidden it in a part of his body that was not intended as a place to keep your tobacco. The physician formed an opinion out of both history and current observation of making a conclusion in the first few seconds. And how many years do physicians spend trying to be good observers and good diagnosticians? As Eva pointed out, we can't help this. And so, friends, my theory, and then we'll have a few minutes for discussion before turning this back over to Lily. My theory is that we as supervisors need to understand the nature of living encounters, because with our stories that clients bring to us, supervisees bring to us, they're bringing a picture from the past. They may or may not be good describers of what actually happened. They may not even know. All we're getting from them is their story about that picture. That's all we can get. And so we practice encountering. And first of all, understand our own reactions when we encounter this beautiful piece of art called our client. This too is a work of art, still in the process of being created. What happens when we encounter them? Thoughts, questions, disagreements, agreements, I don't care. Let's be here together for just a few minutes, and then Lily will come back in and take over.
Well, when I was trained as a psychotherapist, we were trying to relate our feelings and emotions to the profile of the patient. And so now I know that when I feel some special kind of being bored, it's most probably a person who is in a deep fundamental depression. Also, and we have trained different segments like that. So it's I believe that it's possible to be trained to recognize a number of psychological profiles just by the internal signal.
Right.
And it takes a few milliseconds instead of thinking about what are the elements.
That's great, Michelle. As coaches, we're not trained to create psychological profiles in the same way, but knowing that I'm having a reaction and picking up on patterns of those reactions and using them not as a diagnosis, but as an opening for inquiry with our supervisees. It's like the great poet E.E. Cummings wrote, now the eyes of my eyes are open. This is what I want to call forward. Now the eyes of my eyes are open. Or in another source, now I see thee face to face. Before I was looking through a looking glass or a filtered mirror. Hello, Kim, I'm just seeing you there.
I have a comment, or would love a comment from you, Sam.
Good. Kim.
I'm so inspired and appreciate the posture, the values, the experience that you're giving us today. And I want to be able to catalyze and inspire those kind of spaces in the world that I'm in. At the same time, we all probably recognize what we experience with each other isn't necessarily the story or the experience of those who come to us or who are in the spaces that we facilitate. What kind of things do you do internally, externally to help bridge that gap, to be fully present to the client and to the place that they're at, and yet to create spaciousness for and curiosity to step out of that into different spaces?
Well, I hope this is a useful and short answer, Kim. My practice is that I share in supervision more than in coaching. I share my experience in the moment. Here's what I'm experiencing right now. I just painted this picture, this metaphor just came to mind as we're talking. I wonder what's the story that you're living in right now? Even, and this happened very recently in a first supervision call, what's your experience of me? I sensed that this was a person I'd never met before, lives in a different country, has had different experiences. I sensed that this person was willing to be that vulnerable with me. She might have said, "Oh, no." In fact, her cheeks turned quite red as we spoke. So I said, what's your story? What's my story? These are not the truth. They're our first reaction to an encounter. We're just encountering each other right now. But, and I'll switch, and if we become able together to acknowledge, to be aware of, and to acknowledge and to explore what's happening between us and in us right now, it will serve your coaching clients because you will become a more astute encounterer with your client. And here we get to practice doing that because there's no judgment. Or if there is judgment, then judgment is something really cool to talk about. And the other thing, Kim, is go out and encounter life. As I know you do, all over the picture of the world behind you. I know you've encountered life in so many places. And the people. And feel again those encounters and how they've shaped you. And if you haven't done those kinds of things, go to the nearest tree and have a conversation with it. I did that with a particular tree at the turn of the millennium when everybody was terrified about Y2K. So I went to Yosemite National Park in California and went to the grizzly giant, who is estimated to be 3,000 years old. And I stood in front of this magnificent bit of life. And the tree said to me, "Don't worry about it. I've been through 3 of them. Get over it." All right, Lily, back to you.
Whew, that's a lot of stuff to absorb, Sam, and lots to think about and very provocative. Thank you so much. Let's take ourselves off our microphones and give Sam a big hand. Woo! He can hear it.
Bravo. Yay.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. All right, so let's move on here. And remember, I see Sam as an elder in our communities in a very most generous way, Sam. Not like you're old, but you're an elder. It's got a certain status to that in our community. So we shall be seeking you out in the future. December 21st at noon, if you're available, come into this same room. We're having a celebration and a connection of community. No speaker, just come in and have a conversation and celebrate and say goodbye to 2020. My goodness.
Yes.
The dates for 2021 were posted in the newsletter that went out to everyone. So if you want to mark them in your calendars, please do so. We're busy getting speakers. If you want to be a speaker, let me know. There's a few dates still available. And Damien, over to you about the conference.
Okay, well, we have information out for the conference, going to be April 29 and 30 and May 1st. And what we're going to do for the 3 days is do it at different time zones. So we're going to start the first day early in the morning based on Pacific time. And then the second day, we're going to start in the afternoon. Then the third day, we are going to start later, like around 4 p.m. So all of the zones in the world can be covered. So if you want to participate, you may need to have an app for some of the programs. I am going to put right now the early bird information. I put in the link about the conference. The speakers are already confirmed. This year, we didn't have open invitations. We used all of the feedback we got from the last few years. And with Mary and Lily, we came up with a list of presenters, including Sam, who is going to be doing a session on ethical issues. Here we have Eva. We're going to be also doing a session on body and movement. So we are going to have a very interesting, we are really looking forward with Mary and Lily to the conference. We have Pam McLean coming back also to do a demo. Janet Harvey is also going to be doing a demo. So we have a mix of very interactive workshops, demos, and some webinars. Fiona Adamson is also going to come and participate. We're going to have a session on group supervision as we have done this year. We're going to do something similar next year. So we're looking forward to that. The early bird is February 15th. So if you want to go and look at the details, you can, I have the link here. And thanks for all of your comments. For people who don't know, I am navigating COVID-19 now. I am doing okay. But so thank for people who are asking, I am doing okay. Thank you.